In 2016, one of the most influential celebrities on the planet stopped in the middle of a performance to repeat the same phrase for almost 2 minutes, staring blankly into space. The video went viral. Comments ranged from humor to concern, but few questioned why the footage, even after the event was classified as a minor discomfort, still circulated so strongly, as if it played a deeper role than just entertaining. That moment, like so many other similar episodes, seemed more staged than spontaneous. What if it wasn't just another weird celebrity moment, but part of something bigger? In recent years, collective behavior has changed at unprecedented speeds. A video, a challenge, or even a comment taken out of context can set the tone for an entire generation in just a few days. Some say this is just the power of social media. But what if that power is being directed by something beyond entertainment? Something that uses celebrities as bait to shape mentalities on a large scale? Are we being watched or conditioned? Welcome to another night, where the mysteries never sleep. I'm Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your help. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube deliver these videos to more people and in allowing me to keep bringing this content to you. I'm counting on you. Let's get into the video. Have you noticed how some trends appear out of nowhere, dominate the internet within hours, and suddenly, everyone is doing the same thing? Dances, catchphrases, challenges. Millions of people acting almost like a single organism. We tend to think it's all just fun. But what if I told you that behind each of these waves, there's a pattern? And that pattern isn't random. It was built, tested, and it works like a real mass command system. This isn't just a loose theory. There's a history behind it. Back in 2014, for example, Facebook admitted to conducting an experiment with nearly 700,000 users, manipulating the content they saw to measure emotional impact. They called it academic research. But think about it. If this kind of test was done openly once, how many other times did it happen without us knowing? Over time, this kind of manipulation stopped being an isolated experiment. It became embedded in the platform's structure. Today, algorithms know exactly what hooks us, what pushes us away, what irritates us, what moves us. And with that information, they create an environment where the right content shows up at the right time, not by chance, but to provoke a specific reaction. And here comes a concept few people know about, but that's becoming more and more present: command entertainment. It's when content stops being just a distraction and starts functioning as a form of direction. Celebrities, influencers, songs, and viral videos become tools to guide the behavior of the masses. We think we're watching by choice, but are we really? Take the case of the Harlem Shake in 2013. Suddenly, the entire world was filming videos with the same structure. It was funny, it was chaotic, but at the same time, it was scary to see the synchronicity. How can something so specific reach so many people in so many countries at the same time? That's not just virality, that's coordination. And when you start paying closer attention, you realize that this kind of coincidence happens all the time. One artist does something bizarre on stage. Another goes viral for strange behavior. A third launches an absurd challenge, and millions follow without questioning. Is it all really spontaneous? Or were these actions planned to test what we accept, what we replicate, what we normalize? The big platforms know this. They map our responses. Every like, every share, every second we spend watching something, it's all data. And that data feeds a machine that learns how to trigger even stronger reactions. That's why content feels increasingly sharper, more addictive, more targeted. The strangest part is that no one tells you when a test is happening, because in practice, it never stops. The world has become a real-time laboratory, and we're the sample. But unlike a traditional experiment, where you know you're being observed, here, you only realize it after you've already participated. And don't be fooled into thinking this is something new. Since the rise of radio and TV, there's been talk of social engineering. But now, with real-time data and global reach, the scale has changed. What used to take months to spread now happens in minutes. And there's no need for censorship or direct control. Just the right video with the right message at the right moment. All of this leads us to a disturbing question. Who's really behind these viral waves? Who decides what becomes a trend? And why are certain behaviors, even the most absurd ones, so strongly promoted by the platforms? It may seem like an exaggeration, but when you connect the dots, the pattern becomes clear. We're not just consuming entertainment, we're being guided by it. When a celebrity does something absurd or unexpected, the audience's first reaction is usually shock. Then comes laughter, criticism, memes. But beneath it all, there is a deeper dynamic at play. It's not just about what the celebrity did, it's about how the audience reacted. And it's exactly that reaction that interests those who observe large-scale behavior. Celebrities are more than famous faces. They are symbols, modern archetypes that evoke specific emotions. When one of them acts, the effect is multiplied. It doesn't matter if you love or hate that figure. The mere fact that they exist in your field of attention already triggers something within you. And that, for those who study social manipulation, is gold. In recent years, many of these well-known faces have begun engaging in increasingly bizarre, controversial, or disconnected from reality actions. Apparently, for no reason at all. But when we analyze them collectively, the pattern starts to emerge. Extreme behavior draws attention, and mass attention generates data. But the real question is, who is using that data, and for what? Take, for example, the case of the singer who stopped a performance to stand still, staring into space for nearly 2 minutes. It made headlines on every site. Theories exploded. They said she was exhausted, that it was a marketing stunt, or even that she was under the influence of something. But what if that moment was simply a test? An experiment in how the public reacts to the unusual, the uncomfortable, the unexplained? The pattern repeats. Artists drastically change styles, make controversial statements, then disappear. Actors have public breakdowns. Influencers promote products they clearly don't use. All of it is closely monitored, because more important than what is done is how people respond. And that response fuels the next moves. There's a name for this in some areas of study: behavior vectors. These are elements within a society that have the power to start a chain of actions with just a gesture or a statement. And no one has that power today more than celebrities with global reach. They become testing tools, like pieces on a much larger board. The most unsettling question is, do these celebrities know they're being used? In some cases, maybe yes. In others, probably not. Because often the control isn't direct. It's not someone telling them what to do. It's a system that rewards certain behaviors and punishes others. And over time, that creates a kind of silent conditioning. When a celebrity earns millions from a viral video where they do something stupid, that behavior is reinforced. When they are ignored for doing something sensible or thoughtful, the system shows that path isn't worth it. Little by little, the ecosystem begins to shape the content, and the content shapes the audience. It's no coincidence that the most popular influencers are the ones who generate extreme reactions. The algorithm favors intensity, not quality, and the more intense the reaction, whether positive or negative, the more data is harvested. This turns every post, every public appearance, into a social experiment disguised as entertainment. These public figures become a bridge between the laboratory and the masses. What they do spreads, echoes, replicates. And when something is replicated by millions, it stops being individual. It becomes culture, a new pattern of thought or behavior. And it all starts with a simple act, a gesture, a phrase, a challenge. And so we have to ask, how many of the choices we make, the ideas we follow, the habits we adopt, were born from something we saw a famous person doing? And what if those choices weren't as spontaneous as they seem? There are things you hear, and you stop and think, this can't be true. But when you start connecting the details, the dates, the names, everything starts to make too much sense. That's exactly what happened when a confidential report ended up in the wrong hands, or maybe the right ones. Because if this document hadn't leaked, no one would have made the connections you're about to see. The file title looked like any technical document: Interactions and Mapping in Digital Environments, Cycle 7. But upon opening it, the language was different. Cold, strategic, and very clear. This report described large-scale testing with influencers and celebrities as behavioral triggers. And the scariest part, the targets of these tests were us. The contents revealed that various viral campaigns, those weird trends that seemed to pop up out of nowhere, didn't emerge spontaneously. According to the report, they were part of well-defined testing phases. The plan was simple: launch a stimulus, observe reactions, collect data, and adjust the next wave. But the level of detail was what really stood out. They referred to users as reactive elements. That's right. People, treated as components of an equation. And celebrities? Class A stimulus carriers. And their role was clear, to provoke chain reactions with minimal direct intervention. In other words, plant chaos without raising suspicion. One part of the report mentions, the effectiveness of behavioral replication is directly proportional to the emotional bond with the stimulus carrier. Translation: the more you like, admire, or hate a celebrity, the easier it is to make you imitate what they do. And this isn't a theory, it's a calculation. They measure it. There was one specific case that caught my attention, a challenge that went viral globally in less than 48 hours. It looked like any random meme, but the report indicated it was part of a sequence. First, they tested acceptance, then control. With each phase, the response pattern was analyzed, like an experiment, but with millions of test subjects, and without anyone knowing. One sentence in particular froze me. Absorption rates in the 18 to 35 segment demonstrate viability to scale phase 4. Phase 4. But what is that? The report doesn't explain. It only hints that 3 other phases had already been completed, and now they were ready for something bigger. This sounds like a movie plot, but it was in a corporate document. Real. Technical. Cold. After some excerpts began circulating in forums and smaller networks, the disappearance was swift. Sites that published the content went down suddenly. Accounts that commented on it claimed to receive notifications, strikes, loss of access. Coincidence? Or part of the very control the report described? And of course, the companies involved denied everything. No surprise there. But the silence was so absolute that it only made everything more suspicious. Because when something like this appears and then vanishes from everywhere, you know it hit a nerve. What this document revealed is that there is a process, a method. We're not talking about random viral trends. We're talking about mass emotional programming, entertainment as code, influence as a tool, and manipulation as science. Now look at this. If these phases are still being developed in silence, without anyone noticing, the question that won't leave your mind is, what exactly are they preparing for us? Have you ever wondered why certain videos appear to you at the exact moment when you're most likely to click? Why some content seems to follow you around in an almost intelligent way? It's not a coincidence. Platforms aren't just social networks. They are, in practice, environments of continuous observation, real digital laboratories, open 24 hours a day. But what if I told you that you're not just browsing them? You're being tested on them. With every click, every finger swipe, every second you watch a video, you're giving something away. Not a choice, a pattern. And that pattern is collected, cross-referenced, analyzed. You think you're using the system, but what if the system is using you? It's easy to imagine that algorithms simply suggest content based on what we like. But that's already outdated. The game has changed. Platforms have learned not just to predict behavior, but to shape it. And the inevitable question is, if they can shape it, why would they stop there? A study from MIT revealed that video recommendation algorithms can predict your next click with up to 82% accuracy. Sounds harmless, right? But what happens when that prediction is used not to serve you better, but to steer you? To what extent is what you're watching really your choice, and not a disguised suggestion? That bizarre video you found funny, even though it wasn't really your thing. Maybe it was placed there on purpose. Maybe the algorithm already knew that, at that specific moment, you'd be in the right state of attention, mood, or boredom to engage with it. You think that's a coincidence? Or were you being tested? The expression influence engineering didn't come out of nowhere. It describes a set of digital practices where the goal isn't to inform, it's to induce. And content is the perfect vehicle for that. Light, fun, addictive, but also calculated, strategic, and increasingly precise. Are we still in control of what we consume, or just reacting to the right commands at the right time? Researchers at the University of Oxford analyzed billions of interactions on social networks and found a troubling pattern. Content that triggers anger or euphoria gets priority in the algorithm. Why? Because it provokes intense reactions. And intense reactions generate more valuable data. Emotion became currency. Behavior became product. But perhaps the scariest point is this. You no longer need to be convinced of anything. You just need to be conditioned. And that conditioning happens gradually, without you noticing. Like a rope being pulled millimeters a day. You don't even feel it until you can't go back. The algorithm doesn't judge. It has no morals. It only learns. Learns what holds your attention. Learns what makes you comment. Learns what turns you into part of the chain. And what does it do with that knowledge? It replicates. It scales. And it turns it all into new bait to test the next group. These platforms aren't just tools. They're autonomous systems that feed themselves with your attention. They observe, test, adjust, and reset. The experiment never stops. The only variable that changes is you. Now think about it. If these platforms can already manipulate our most basic impulses, like the desire to click, to share, to follow a trend, what else can they manipulate? And more importantly, what are they already manipulating that we haven't even realized? There are things we see and immediately think, there's no way so many people fell for this. A dangerous challenge, a weird trend, a senseless behavior that suddenly becomes the norm. But what if all of this isn't just a passing fad? What if these challenges are actually disguised experiments? Silent rehearsals to measure how much people obey, without realizing they're obeying? Think of the Tide Pod Challenge. People, mostly young, biting into laundry detergent pods as if it were part of a game. No one won anything. There was no reward. Just views. How did that spread so much? Why did it go viral so quickly? The answer might lie in the fact that it wasn't just bizarre behavior. It was a test of the acceptance of absurd suggestion. How far would someone go just because they saw others doing it? And it's not just with dangerous actions. Sometimes obedience shows up in simple things, like repeating a dance, using a specific filter, or even saying a phrase out of context. It seems harmless, but when millions do it at the same time, the impact is deep. It's like a code being executed on a massive scale, with each individual believing they're just having fun. What these tests evaluate isn't just who participates. They measure how long it takes for an idea to spread, who influences whom, which group replicates more strongly, and most importantly, who resists and who doesn't. This provides a valuable database for anyone who wants to understand the psychological workings of a collective. And here's the most important detail. None of these trends are born from the public. They are launched, often by public figures with large reach, at carefully chosen moments. They come wrapped in humor, nostalgia, or challenge, but what's behind it is something else. It's a behavioral testing mechanism that uses entertainment as a disguise. Have you ever noticed how some trends appear right after a major controversy or crisis? As if they're there to redirect attention? It could be just coincidence, but it could also be a form of focus control. A way to test how collective emotions can be diverted with the right content at the right time. And what if the real function of these trends is to measure the mental plasticity of an entire generation? How far are we willing to adapt without questioning? How much do we accept the absurd, the useless, the harmful, as long as it's disguised as entertainment? There are cases where platforms promoted clearly dangerous challenges, only to pull back days later, claiming they didn't foresee the impact. Really? Or was the impact already anticipated? And that's exactly why it was so closely observed. Sometimes, the best way to study human behavior is to let it act freely, within a test field. Every trend is like a lever switch. Someone up top is watching, who clicked, who repeated, who went viral. And with that, new patterns of manipulation are created, based on what has already worked. It's a self-feeding cycle. The more the public reacts, the more data is collected, and the more precise the next commands become. And you might think, but I only watched, I didn't participate. But in this system, watching is already a response. Liking is a response. Ignoring is a response. Everything becomes a metric, and every metric is a signal. Direct feedback for those running the experiment. So, the real question isn't why these trends exist. The question is, what exactly is being measured every time a new one appears? And what are they waiting for us to accept next? At this point, it's hard to ignore the pattern. Trends that spread like wildfire, celebrities launching behaviors with global reach, platforms that reward extreme emotional reactions. All of it seems part of a much larger mechanism. But if this is an ongoing process, what comes next? What's the next stage of this invisible engineering? One of the most discussed hypotheses in academic circles is that of progressive behavioral normalization. In other words, the more you repeat a behavior, the less strange it feels. And when millions repeat it, it becomes the norm. What once seemed absurd gradually becomes accepted. And if it's accepted, it can be expanded. Have you thought about how certain controversial ideas that would have been rejected 10 years ago are now discussed as if they've always been part of society? We're not talking about cultural evolution. We're talking about induced adaptation. Manipulation doesn't need to be abrupt. In fact, the more subtle it is, the more effective. Based on this model, the next step seems clear: to create programmed behaviors that not only entertain but shape values. The idea is simple: use entertainment as a Trojan horse. On the outside, a funny dance. On the inside, a new mental code. And if that sounds exaggerated, it's worth remembering that major opinion campaigns are already being tested in light formats: skits, lip syncs, filters, seemingly silly trends. But the content being spread carries positions, ideologies, and habits in disguise. And the question no one asks is, who decides what should be absorbed? Some experts are already speaking of an era of cultural conditioning via algorithm. This means that instead of direct indoctrination, what we have is a kind of progressive formatting, in which preferences, opinions, and even behaviors are shaped based on what the data shows to be most acceptable, most shareable, most viral. Could it be that the future of manipulation is invisible? A kind of control that no longer needs censorship, force, or imposition. Just enough repetition to become natural? Think about how language has already changed. How gestures, slang, expressions, and even emotional reactions are now copied. Not because someone told us to, but because they appeared on screen often enough. That's the essence of the new control. No one needs to command. Just show repeatedly. And what if the final step is no longer just influencing what you do, but shaping how you think? An artificially created opinion can become indistinguishable from a genuine one. And an entire generation raised within that logic may not even realize it was shaped. If all of this is a construction, and the signs point to yes, the final piece of this process is terrifying, because it no longer depends on celebrities, trends, or algorithms. It depends on the audience continuing to act exactly as it was trained to act. So where is this going? Maybe toward a scenario where freedom of choice exists, but within a carefully curated menu. A world where the decisions are yours, but the options never were. Nothing shown here requires blind faith or exaggerated theory. These are facts, patterns, and decisions calculated by systems that know more about human behavior than most people can imagine. Entertainment has gradually stopped being a distraction and become a tool. A tool to test, adjust, and guide. But what if all of this is just a piece? A fragment of what's truly being built? Because when the trends stop, the data continues. When the celebrity vanishes, the behavior is already planted. And when the video ends, the programming goes on. This story is just one piece, and one day, maybe you'll see the whole puzzle. If this made you think, subscribe and like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share. After all, more voices mean more discoveries.